Welcome to our knowledge series, and today we're going to present on adaptations. So what exactly is adaptations? Basically, when you train, you're trying to bring your body past the homeostatic level, or what we call the baseline level, to cause a form of adaptations. So every time you train, it's very important to know what exactly are you putting in terms of stimulus, how exactly are you recovering, because the stimulus plus the recovery will cause the homeostatic adaptations. And you also you start to understand in this topic that more isn't better, because more is just going to cause a huge drastic deficit, which would cause your inability to recover to cause good adaptations to the body. So when it comes to strength training, a curve that's really, really important is called the SRA curve, or the Stimulus, Recoverability, and Adaptation curve. If you look at this line over here, this line, the straight line, is what we call the homeostatic level. That is your baseline level. Whenever you start to introduce a stimulus, it will cause a deficit, which would cause a fatigue, and that's where you see a suffer in performance. And then when over time, given if you have enough recovery and good recovery strategies, this curve would start to go upwards over time, causing an adaptation at the top. One thing to note is that it doesn't mean that with time you'll cause an adaptation, because if this curve is too much, if there's too much fatigue being caused by way too much stimulus, which we'll explain in a bit, and the recovery isn't good, you may find that you may actually suffer a decrease in performance because it can't pass the adaptation curve. And then right over here, as the curve starts to dip down, it's what we call the involution curve. An involution curve it means that right over here, that's where you see an increase in performance past your homeostatic level. But if you don't train past a certain time, that's what we call a fitness decay, and it starts to involve, and it goes back down, and even go down below the homeostatic level. So now, what exactly is stimulus? What affects it? You have to understand that it's not just training. It's also the external influences like your daily life stresses and stuff like that. So let me just go deep into the details. When it comes to stimulus, there's this thing called the internal and the external stimulus. Internal being everything that's training related. Again, it doesn't mean that it's good. Sometimes when you do too much, too soon, it's actually a bad thing. And the external stimulus are things like stresses outside of training, things like your work-related stress, family-related stress, relationship-related stress, or even like dietary stress. So food that you shouldn't be eating because it causes allergies and stuff like that. When you consume too much sugar, it causes inflammation in the body, and things along that line. So you have to note that internal and external is what causes the stimulus. Too much of a deficit, again, it's not a good thing. We need to try and control this. So later on, when we talk about trainability, I will explain more on how do we actually control the internal and the external training stresses, just to ensure that we have just enough of a deficit to actually adapt from. When we are putting in the stimulus, what exactly are we looking at in terms of what are we actually trying to get the body to adapt? It all boils down to these 5 systems. So whenever you train, you are targeting these 5 systems to try and get them to adapt. It's not just about the musculoskeletal system, but it's all about the central nervous system, the peripheral nervous system, musculoskeletal system, organs, tendons, and ligaments. So let me just go briefly into what they are. So when it comes to central nervous system, especially when you do very, very hard and heavy, high-intensity training, and by that, I don't mean HIIT, I mean heavy 90% of 1 RM kind of training, it will cause a form of central nervous system fatigue. That being said, anytime that you have any form of physical training, even aerobic work, is going to cause a bit of a central nervous system fatigue as well, because everything comes from the brain. Definitely there will be some form of fatigue. It's a matter of to what degree and to what level. Next up is your peripheral nervous system fatigue, not to be confused with the central nervous system fatigue. This fatigue that you feel is very much, you have the drive to train, but you realize that no matter what you do, just that day you just can't seem to lift the amount of weights that you're lifting. Although it seems like you are not sore because you're not sore because it's not a musculoskeletal system problem, but you have the drive, and therefore you know you have the drive, but you don't have the strength. It's probably got to do with a peripheral nervous system fatigue. How did this come about? It could be things like you're moving a furniture or you're moving a lot of boxes during your work period of time. It's not a full contraction of the muscles, but it definitely will cause some form of fatigue in this region. So for central nervous system fatigue, how you know is that it's where you lack the drive, you don't feel like training. That's how you know that you have a bit of a central nervous system fatigue. With regards to musculoskeletal system, this is pretty much what we call your DOMS, or your delayed onset muscle soreness. So how you know that you're not recovered from the musculoskeletal system fatigue is that you still feel sore, and usually it takes it should take at most 72 hours to recover. Anything more than 72 hours to recover, you know that you've overdone it. Next up, your organs, so things like your liver and your pancreas especially, because your pancreas is what produces, liver and pancreas is what produces things like your human growth hormone. So it's especially important to take care of them. So what fatigues this system the most is when you do very, very much metabolic substrate-like training, like circuit training, or anything that consists of fast-paced, big muscle groups, huge number of repetitions, short rest. So think of it as like you're doing a superset of back squats and bench press, or pull-ups and deadlifts, anything that causes a lot of that kind of feeling, that's when you know that you're taxing your organs. Okay, the fifth and the last system, the tendons and ligaments. Every time you do any form of training, be it aerobic, be it strength training, be it muscle kind of training, you are going to tax some form of your ligaments and tendons. So they also have to recover, and usually ligaments and tendons, because they do not have enough blood flow going to them, it takes a bit of a longer time to recover, especially if you find that you have strained them past what they're usually used to. Something that we'll talk about in the future on our knowledge series is nutrition, but I have to talk about it just a little bit today to give you a brief overview on how it actually affects your recoverability. When it comes to nutrition, you have to match the training and the kind of nutrition that you are consuming face to face. So, for example, if you're doing a very much circuit-like training, you need to ensure that you have just a decent amount of carbohydrates to try and support what the liver and the pancreas is trying to do to the body. It's basically when you do any kind of circuit-like training, you're trying to train your liver to try and get rid of the substrates efficiently. And whenever you do any form of heavy taxing musculoskeletal system kind of training, it's all about feeding your body high enough carbohydrates. You don't want to skim away from carbohydrates over here, because if you're doing high sets and reps, high volume, that's what your body needs, carbohydrates. And if you don't feed it, you go into this process of what we call the gluconeogenesis, extremely taxing on the body, and it causes way too much inflammation in the body. Then how about low carbs? Do they belong anywhere? Definitely. Low carbs has its place, but not in the musculoskeletal training realm or the circuit training realm, but it belongs more in the central nervous system kind of training. So when you're doing sets of 1 to 3 reps at high intensity, not saying you don't need carbohydrates, it's just that if you're doing it for maintenance, just trying to lose some weight while maintaining your strength, for example, if you're preparing for a show, or dieting down to your last digits of percentage of body fat percentage, that's where you can have a lower amount of carbohydrates because it doesn't interfere in terms of your CNS training that much. So how do we then improve the recoverability of these 5 systems? We talk about the central nervous system. Well, we need to do things like sleep and taurine. Taurine taken at about 4 grams post-training helps to calm your nervous system down. With regards to sleep, it's about sleeping at the same time, best before 11 p.m. to allow human growth hormone to take effect. Try to get about 8 hours of sleep if you can. I know it's really hard in this time and age, but it's something that you need to try and work towards, or you need to take naps. How to improve your peripheral nervous system? It's usually things like magnesium, and not all magnesiums are created the same. Magnesium glycinate is usually the best form. You can also consider things like magnesium threonate that really helps to calm the peripheral nervous system down. When it comes to the DOMS, or the delayed onset muscle soreness, it's all about trying to do active recovery on the days that you don't train. So what consists of active recovery are things like swimming, brisk walking, light ski erg, and along the lines, anything that's about 30% of what your 1 rep maximum, best done in an acyclical manner. Even things like maybe even yoga or mobility work, that would definitely help because it helps to flush blood to the muscles that are being worked or are sore. Things like massages helps as well. In fact, massages, I would say, helps not just the musculoskeletal, but the peripheral and the central nervous system as well. Just take note though, the kind of massage that you do is extremely crucial. Sports massage or deep tissue massage don't belong over here because they cause way too much musculoskeletal system damage and it's going to cause a delay in recovery as well. So you want to look at long Swedish F-fluach kind of techniques. That would really help in terms of your recovery. Another thing that you can do are things like compression boots, sold by one of our affiliate partners, the Recovery Systems Method, and or compression socks. And this really helps to also improve your blood flow to the muscles, just to help you in terms of recovery. One thing to take note of when I mention compression and all this stuff, percussion guns are not mentioned over here because percussion guns would cause too much excitation in the muscles and the brain to cause that recovery that you actually need. So when it comes to recovering your organs, like the liver and the pancreas, things that will help are usually supplements. So the milk thistle will definitely help in terms of recovering your liver. And dietary fibers, like your greens, they are really, really good in detoxing your liver. And when it comes to tendons and ligaments, the best thing that you can help is active mobility or static stretches actually help them as well. Because no matter what kind of training that you do, be it aerobic or strength training, you will find that your muscles will have to contract. And every time it contracts, it shortens. So the only way to help them is to go back into a state of lengthen or the state of homeostasis. And that concludes stimulus and recoverability. And our next topic, I'm going to talk about trainability and adaptations.